The content of this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. It's not medical advice and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, disorder, or medical condition. It should never replace any advice given to you by your physician or any other licensed healthcare provider. Insomnia Coach LLC offers coaching services only and does not provide therapy, counseling, medical advice, or medical treatment. The statements and opinions expressed by guests are their own and are not necessarily endorsed by Insomnia Coach LLC. All content is provided as is and without warranties, either express or implied. Vicky dealt with her insomnia by taking sleeping pills, and this seemed to work well until one night, after 20 years of regular use, the medication didn't help her sleep. This led Vicky to think that something was wrong with her. She felt alone. She felt that without getting the amount of sleep she wanted to get, she would be unable to take care of her children, and she wouldn't be able to be the person she wanted to be or live the life she wanted to live. She started to experience a lot of anxiety and would wake up in the middle of the night and have panic attacks. This all led Vicky to explore a new approach to insomnia that involved letting go of the struggle. She began to recognize that difficult thoughts and feelings, although very unpleasant, didn't need to prevent her from doing things that mattered, so she didn't need to engage in a battle with them. Vicky started to allow her mind to think what it wanted to think and to generate the full range of human feelings and emotions. She started to acknowledge and make space for thoughts and feelings, even though she often wished they weren't showing up, instead of going to war with them. She committed to doing things that were important and meaningful, even after difficult nights, and even in the presence of uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. Today, Vicky still experiences some difficult nights from time to time, but she is no longer engaged in an exhausting and distracting battle with her mind throughout the day and throughout the night. She's living the kind of life she wants to live, even when difficult nights happen, and even when uncomfortable thoughts and feelings show up. In fact, Vicky now thinks of her insomnia as a gift, as something that has helped her become more resilient and better able to react in a more workable way to the difficulties we all experience as human beings. A full transcript of this podcast and an accompanying video can be found at insomniacoach.com/podcast. Okay, so Vicky, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come onto the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to everything that we're hoping to cover today, so let's just dive right in at the start. If you could just tell us when your sleep problems first began and what you think caused those initial issues with sleep.
I'll start right from the very beginning where it all started kind of in my teens, and I think it's about when I was 17. I got my very first early morning job, and of course, that kind of got my nerves going before when I go to bed. And it actually, I didn't sleep well. But then going on forward with that job, I kind of hung on to that problem of and stress about not being able to sleep. I also have a background where my father has insomnia too. So being around a house of not good sleep was kind of normal. And I went to him because he had the same kind of problems. So obviously, he was probably a good person to go to at that time. And so he's commonly on Zopicone. The blue pill is what people commonly known it is as. But yeah, he gave me one of those and it worked fine. And from then, I just started taking a little bit of it, like maybe a quarter, like not even the full thing. But that just began the habit of relying on sleeping pills whenever I had an early morning. So then, fast forward into my 20s, it would be like every day before I go to bed for work. Very manageable. And then on the weekends, I would be totally off of it. So really, it was psychological, if you think about it. And then fast forward again until my late 30s now. I have 3 kids, and the first 2 were fine with sleep and everything. The third one, I'm not sure what changed, but I think it was because of my third. It was like all these little pieces of puzzles that kind of came into place, and it fit really well to create this big monster of insomnia, anxiety, and stress. It was my third one, and it was going to be our last one. So I was very cherishing that moment. And then when the infant stage kind of moved on, I was grieving that stage, and she just grew up so fast. And I think I was kind of sad that way. And then at the same time, I just cut off nursing right off. And that was hard too. And I think because of that, there was also a lot of hormones related to not breastfeeding anymore. And so I had a very hard time letting go of that. Plus then, going to sleep, I was thinking about that. And there was one night that just triggered everything where I couldn't sleep. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to take this sleeping pill. I took half, it didn't work. I took another half and it didn't work. And I was like, okay, should I overdose? I don't want to overdose on this. So I'm right. The sleeping pill's not working. So this is a problem. And then that, ignited a lot of stuff like anxiety and then panic attacks in the middle of the night. I would wake up in the middle of the night and have a panic attack and then not be able to fall asleep. So it really spiraled downwards in 2021 of September.
Yeah. It's, I think I hear that quite a lot. I'm thinking just to myself that I think a lot of people are going to identify with that process where you have the sleeping pill or the supplement or whatever that external thing is that we kind of rely on as a crutch to get us through difficult nights. And those things tend to be fine for as long as they have an effect, right? But then the downside is that when that experience happens where we use that crutch and it doesn't seem to have an effect, then we can just become so much more worried than perhaps we would have done if that crutch wasn't even available to us, because now we're taking that thing that we've always believed will generate sleep for us, and even that's not working now, and that can really be quite scary. Was that the case for you, and you found that wasn't helping anymore?
Yeah, so once the sleeping pill didn't work, it was very scary. Because it's worked for me for the last 20 years, right? And I'm taking 1.5 of the amount that I used to take at least, right? And so I'm there's something wrong with me. The feelings of there's something wrong and I'm the only one, because sleeping pills should be working for everyone, especially the prescription ones. So yeah, it caused a lot of anxiety and stress. Yeah.
It's really interesting, this whole relationship we can have with just use sleeping pills. It really doesn't matter. It's just whatever that external thing is that we rely on or we see as a safety net. I think what happens is it's a comfort, right? So we take that kind of pill. We know from experience that now sleep is going to happen. So all that kind of worry, that pressure we might be putting on ourselves to sleep, that effort we might be putting into sleep, we kind of just drop all that struggle. And I think that might be one of the real mechanisms behind how they actually work. It's less to do with whatever's in what we're taking and more to do with just, I've I've taken that thing. Now I can relax. I don't have to worry. I don't have to fight with my mind. I don't have to try anymore. And it's that abandonment of the trying that tends to generate that good sleep. And so then going back to your experience, okay, I've taken this pill, but if there's still all that big underlying anxiety or worry or stress going on, the mind is still going to be churning over that. And so then we find, now this pill isn't working. I hate using the air quotes, but it's not working. I'm not getting the desired result. And just like you said, then you just start to get really worried, because now it's like, well, this isn't even working now. What's going on? Like, I must be unique, but it's not, it's just down to the fact that at the end of the day, we haven't got to the root cause, that root problem of what's creating this long-term sleep disruption. And I'm sure we'll get to talk some more about that, but really it just comes down to our relationship with all those thoughts and feelings that are going on in our mind, and often a change in our behaviors as we try to protect our sleep, try and make more sleep happen, and just fix the problem that we're dealing with, right?
And actually, that's kind of how I found out about your podcast, actually. It was, I felt alone, but I was like, realistically, I can't be alone. So I just searched up, like insomnia and like just anything to help me during the day to listen to other people's stories. And I did listen to one of your podcasts with a lady. I think she was a mother too, and somehow she went on the sleeping pill and it didn't work for her. So that was really, it didn't solve my problem, but it was like very comforting to know that and hear like a real true story that it wasn't working for someone else. And so that's when I really started to like do my research and start doing more digging.
And this is exactly why I'm so grateful for guests like yourself coming on and just talking about this, because it can be so helpful, so comforting just to know that you're not alone, right? That what you're going through isn't unique or unusual. That in itself can just be so reassuring. And like you said, it's not going to necessarily fix everything. Just knowing that isn't going to fix everything, but it's just so reassuring. So I'm really grateful for you coming on just to talk about this in your own words, because it is really helpful for so many people. So let's just rewind a little bit. So you had, that really difficult night when the medication just didn't seem to work. How do you think that then progressed on to, subsequent nights of sleep disruption? Because, you've got this long history of sleep disruption before, ups and downs. What was it, do you think, this time around after that really difficult night when the medication didn't seem to work, that kind of, why do you feel like things didn't kind of bounce back and recover? Why did things progress and stick around, do you think?
I think just because like the realization that the sleeping pill can not work was a big one. And I didn't have that crutch anymore. And then it just like, I didn't even think that, the sleeping pill wouldn't work, right? I never had that thought before. So then since then that it didn't work, it was like in my head. Like then your brain's like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Like, what if it doesn't work? You're going to be up all night, and then your entire day, the next day is going to be screwed. And, you're not going to be able to take care of your children properly. You're going to be like short-tempered, impatient. You're going to be a bad mother. Like all those stuff start to creep in. And yeah, like that's just very stressful and lots of anxiety around that, especially when you're alone at night, right? It gets really lonely because there's really no one to talk to at that point. And I guess when you're feeling like that, you really want someone to be with you. I think like that for me at least. And so it's like, it's a very stressful and also very scary time, because like the night can be so long if you're not sleeping. And then at that time, you're just like all by yourself too. And you're like, what do I do? Like, I tried like all sorts of stuff, and it's like, it just didn't work. So.
Yeah. So what were the nights like at that time? Was it just really, you were just finding it hard to first fall asleep at the start of the night, or was it to do with waking and finding it hard to fall back to sleep, or was it just, all of the above?
Yeah, it started, I mean, my whole entire insomnia experience always started with just falling asleep. And then after that, it'd be fine. Like I could wake up, go to the washroom, whatever, it's fine. I could go back to sleep. But after that night, that like big night of like the sleeping pill not working, then even when I fall asleep, I would be woken up by, I don't know, I have children, right? Like they would wake us up sometimes, or my partner like snoring, that would wake me up. And that would be like, oh my God, like now I can't, what if I can't fall asleep? So I'll hold on to that, which obviously is not the way to fall back asleep. But, like a lot of people out there, they probably don't know, is just like the best is just to like let go, right? Which is also the hardest thing
Yeah.
to do at the same
Right.
time.
Yeah. It's so easy to
Yeah.
say that, isn't it? Well, just let go.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
don't
Totally.
think of anything. Think positive. Or, but yeah, actually
Yeah.
doing it is very difficult.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched on this before that, when we have a problem, we try and fix it, right? So you obviously tried some different things, before finding this collection of tools, which we'll definitely discuss, that you did find helpful. But before you got to that point where you were actually doing stuff that, looking back, this is what was really, truly the good stuff, the gold that was really helpful. What kind of things had you tried, to try and turn things around that on reflection perhaps weren't that helpful, maybe even ended up being a bit of a distraction?
Ooh, there's probably many. Um, like a distraction, I would say like it was just more like a stress around preparing for sleep. So, like I would do a lot of, yin yoga or yoga nidra. But it was a way to relax, but then, I kind of got stressed out, like, oh, I need to like set aside at least half an hour before going to sleep so I can do my like yoga and stretches, or meditation. And I think that was a bit of a distraction because like I'm already creating that worry pre bedtime. And then if, let's say, I can't get that in because like the night was just so crazy, then it would create like the level of stress would be like kicked up a notch, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those things are good, but then I don't know, for someone who has trouble sleeping, it might not be. At least for me, it was more of a distraction, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it just comes down to intent, right? Because like you said, all these things, they're not necessarily harmful, but anything that we do with the goal of generating sleep, we're just putting more pressure on ourselves, and it kind of takes away the whole purpose of whatever we're doing, so,
Yeah.
many of my clients, they talk about meditation and relaxation techniques and stuff like that. And certainly I'm never going to say, don't do that, it's a bad thing. How can that be a bad thing? But if we're doing it, like we've got this really set rituals, like half an hour before bed, I have to do this meditation routine or this breathing exercise. Got to do it in order to make sleep happen, or to help me feel more relaxed for sleep to happen.
Yeah.
We're just immediately making ourselves less relaxed because we're putting all this pressure on ourselves to, first of all, do this routine or ritual. And if we don't, like you said, then we become really worried. Now I missed that opportunity. And second of all, the whole time we're doing it, that we're trying to let go, we're trying to relax, we're trying to be more present, we're doing it with the goal of influencing something that's going to happen in the future that we have no control over. So it kind of really becomes self-defeating. And I think that's where we can really get tripped up with all this sleep hygiene stuff, that is so prevalent out there. I think it can be helpful as a preventative thing, maybe, if we're kind of burning the candle at both ends, but other than that, we sleep great, then yeah, sure, let's do an unwinding time. Let's just make sure the temperature of our bedroom is optimal, for example. But if we're dealing with chronic insomnia, no amount of sleep hygiene is going to help. And it can actually be more of a hindrance, because we end up just adding more of these rituals and more of these sleep efforts to our lives. And when they don't work, which is to be expected,
Yes,
then we
it
become more
happens.
worried. It's like when that pill doesn't work, right? Oh, this sleep hygiene that everyone's telling me about, even that's not working. I must be truly unique and truly broken.
Yeah.
But it's normal and it's to be expected. We just want to get to that point where we're not engaged in all those efforts, or we just drop that struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, honestly, I've used everything and all of the tools around like better sleep, relaxing, just does not work for me, at least with the insomnia. Like, do the blue light cancellation glasses, all the different supplements you can think of, vitamins, magnesium, melatonin. Yeah, there's like lots of supplements. And it was like, that was in itself stressful. Like, oh, I've got to take this like 30 minutes before bedtime. And sometimes I would forget. I'm like, oh no, like, then get out of bed and like go get those supplements and eat that. And then it doesn't work. And so it creates a whole level of anxiety again, which it's just the effort that you put into it that you're not supposed to. But you just don't realize that you're doing all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's understandable why we would do that, right? Because when we have a problem, we want to put effort into the solution. But unfortunately, sleep is kind of this unique thing where it doesn't respond well to effort. So the more we try, the more we struggle. That's really what it comes down to. And with insomnia, when we think about it, what's our brain's number one job? It's to look out for us, is to protect us. So it's going to tell us, it's going to generate all these difficult thoughts, these difficult feelings and emotions, not to make us feel bad, but to actually look out for us, to try and help us, to help us look for a solution, to help us live the life we want to live, to be aware of threats and risks, right? None of us would be alive today if our brain didn't do that. But when we're really struggling, the brain can kind of goes into overdrive. It tries so hard to help us that it actually ends up getting in the way. And I think the more we engage in those efforts to change how we feel, sometimes then the brain thinks, you're not listening to me. Why are you not listening to me? This is serious. And so it screams even louder at us, and generates even more intense and difficult thoughts and feelings. And the more we try to make sleep happen, the more we reinforce to the brain that, wow, this wakefulness is serious. It's a real threat. Maybe it's a danger. You've got to be alert during the night to protect me from being awake. And then as soon as we're telling the brain to be alert for wakefulness, it's going to make sleep difficult, right? Because we all recognize that an alert brain probably isn't going to be helpful if our goal is to sleep. Yeah.
So true. Like, then your bed your bed and your pillow turns into like something that's like an alert for your brain instead of it's time to like relax.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's this as far as your brain's concerned, there's this imaginary 600-pound gorilla just sitting in your bed waiting to maul you as soon as you climb in. The brain just can't tell the difference between a real physical threat like that gorilla on the bed and this perceived threat, which is wakefulness.
It's funny because I had no problem, like if we're on the couch watching a movie and I'd like doze off, that'd be okay. Or, like sometimes when I meditate, I can easily fall asleep. But when it comes to like real bedtime and then putting your head on that pillow, it's like, your heart starts to pump and then your brain just starts going. So that's so true. It's kind of interesting how that all works, but
It really is interesting. I agree with you. And again, it just comes down to that, the brain looking out for us, really. So before to use your example, let's say you're watching TV earlier in the evening, it's not time to go to bed. So you're not trying to make sleep happen. You're not trying to avoid being awake at night. There's no effort, there's no pressure. So you really feel that sense of sleepiness. But then when it's time to go to bed, now it's okay, you flip that switch. Now you're donning that suit of armor. It's battle time. You know, I've got to
Yeah.
avoid being awake. I've got to make sure I fall asleep in a certain amount of time. I've got to make sure I don't wake up. All this pressure, you know, that we're putting on ourselves, and the brain's trying its hardest to protect us. We're probably not going to feel sleepy. You know, it's like anytime we're going into battle, we're not going to feel sleepy. So really, we want to get to a point where we're just dropping that battle. Which is hard to do because all of our instincts are telling us, you know, avoid this wakefulness. We need sleep to happen. It feels so good to get that sleep. It feels so good to have those thoughts that you can sleep and not to deal with all these thoughts that it's going to be another one of those nights. But the more we struggle with sleep and those thoughts and feelings, unfortunately, the more we get tangled up in that struggle and that battle.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the stuff that you did and was the reason why we're talking today. You know, I don't have a set list, like a set list or anything. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on things that you did find helpful, that you know, helped you over the longer term. Maybe were really difficult in the short term, but actually proved to be helpful over the longer term.
Yeah, like I said before, I found your podcast and started listening to that one lady, and then that led me to like listen to the other ones too. And in general, I found a common pattern. And it's like I wasn't the only one, and it's like everyone out there, and most of these people are like chronic insomniacs, right? So then I went into more research, like around your podcast and the stuff that you do, like the work that you did. And then I signed up for your emails, which then you started sending me the day 1 to day 7 daily emails, which were really good, helpful tips. So that combined with the podcast, I started to realize, you know, some more things. And then I had a really good psychologist that I go to. So I started talking to her. And then she also had like some live in-person workshops, not around insomnia, but just around anxiety and worry, which is kind of closely related. And it just really getting out there to talk to someone really helped. And a group of people too, that she hosted was really helpful. Like just to have people that are in the same path and like in the same boat, really helps just to even talk about it. And then you also mentioned a lot about CBT-I, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy. And I got help with that too. But yeah, just really, at the end of the day, like you can get all these tools, but you just have to work on it yourself too. Like when it comes to nighttime, that's the hardest part. And I mean, it was difficult. I'm not going to lie, but, it's kind of like short-term pain, long-term gain. The idea of, or the thought of not being able to sleep I still think about it every night just because it's just been this ingrained neural path in my brain that's, you know, stayed with me or been with me for maybe 25 years now, right? So, but the key is you just kind of relearn that, you know, if I actually let go, I can fall asleep. And if I don't, I'm still going to function and I'm still going to be that, you know, mother that can take care of my kids. Like it's not going to be the end of the world. I'm not going to accidentally kill them or, you know, like, your brain is really good at thinking, catastrophically. Like you just make it so bad or seem like it's going to be so bad. But really, when you're actually doing it the next day, it's like, yeah, you're going to feel kind of drowsy and maybe not at your best, but you're not just going to be at your worst. So yeah, those tips really help like a lot.
Yeah. And,
Mm-hmm.
that catastrophizing, what's the brain doing there? It's just trying to look out for you. It always wants to kind of
Mm-hmm.
present the worst case scenario just to make sure that you listen and that we take steps to avoid that from happening. And sometimes, well, probably most of the time, that's really helpful. We're going to cross the street. Make sure you look both ways. What if you get mowed down? Your family's all going to starve. Then you're not going to be there for them, etc., right? And it makes us
Yeah.
look both ways. Great. Thanks,
Yeah.
brain. But when
Yeah.
it comes to stuff like sleep that we have no control over, those thoughts can be really difficult, and we can easily get really tangled up in them and believe that they're 100% true. Think of them as facts.
Mm-hmm.
Think of them as a reflection of who we are. Think of them as an obstacle to the kind of person we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, it's just the brain looking out for us, and
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
just acknowledging that, sometimes just really simply just being like, okay, thanks, brain. Thanks for
Yeah.
looking out for me,
Yeah.
and just letting that sit, not trying to push it away, not trying to tell the brain, don't try and protect me, don't try and look out for me, but just let
Mm-hmm.
that thought, just kind of sit next to you, just redirect your focus and your attention elsewhere, and
Yeah.
you kind of
Yeah.
said letting go. Just to clarify, by letting go, do you just mean kind of dropping that struggle, trying to push or avoid certain thoughts or feelings? Or I'd just like to hear your thoughts more on, what you mean by that. And if someone's listening that's like, yeah, I'd love to let go, how do I do that?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, actually. For me, when I start to feel that anxiety, which I still do,
Yeah.
on some days, like there's just those one of those days, like maybe once a week, I'll get that, like, I can't sleep, I have a big day tomorrow. So when I start to feel that during bedtime, I would just let it in. Like, I would try to feel it. Be like,
Mm.
okay, kind of like talking to your brain, but like, okay, anxiety, like, thank you for, warning me. Thank you for coming in and dropping in. And just in, like, before, it was like when I felt so anxious, it was like that right away feeling like, oh my God, like I need this to go. Right. But
Yeah.
now it's like, you still want to do that, but instead you just kind of like invite it and just be like, okay, let me feel all the anxiety right now. Like, just to kind of like accept it. And then when you do, it's like, it kind of just, it feels heard or seen or something. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, like, she's listening to me and now I can let go.
Mm.
So for me, that's how the process kind of works, is just to let it, just to feel it and stop pushing it away. Because the more you resist, the harder it comes
Yeah.
through. So yeah, like, just to accept it, and then it just kind of just eases out, and
Mm.
that's when you can let it go.
Yeah.
So
Let me ask this. Do you find that, when you're really caught up in like really anxious thoughts and feelings, you mentioned that in the past you've even experienced panic attacks. Do you find that it's kind of like when we're really experiencing a lot of anxiety, it feels like it's just going to get more and more intense, right? It's just going to keep ratcheting up and getting worse and worse and worse until something awful happens.
mm-hmm.
But in reality, and sometimes it can be helpful to just recognize this, that it does eventually reach kind of like a plateau. It's like a wave in the ocean, that wave can grow and grow and grow, and it looks like it's just going to wash over you and take you down. But eventually it does kind of recede a little bit. This wave can't grow indefinitely. It does kind of
Mm-hmm.
get really high and then kind of fall again. And then sure, it might come back and get a little bit higher or get almost as high, but then it goes down again.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think it's helpful just recognizing and acknowledging that this is starting to feel really unpleasant, but maybe I can just kind of ride it out? It's as long as I can try and let go and just drop that struggle, sooner or later that wave is going to reach its maximum height and it
Mm-hmm.
will start to fall back down again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of exactly what I do by accepting it and like riding the wave.
Mm.
It's like, just the more you just kind of let it do its thing, it will come down eventually. And for me, it's always came down. It's like, this too shall pass, right? Like, everyone says. So yeah, and I do now, like, for sure get out of bed when I do feel anxious. So my brain does not relate my bed as a place of anxiety. So I'll just get out of bed and go to my little meditation place and just sit there for a little bit and just ride that out. But it's like once I'm out of that bed and like I let myself feel all the emotions or anxiety, things tend to calm down. And sometimes, you know, it may not. Like I'll try that, like that whole cycle, maybe 2, 3, 4, or 5 times a night. But I'll just repeat that whole cycle again and again, and just get out of bed, you know, ride it out, get out of bed, ride it out, go back to bed, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the technique now.
Yeah, and I think if nothing else, the reason why I like this idea of just getting out of bed when it doesn't feel good to be in bed is it just gives us the opportunity to make being awake, we're awake anyway. It just gives you that opportunity to make being awake a bit more pleasant, you know? So instead of just being engaged in that battle of trying to make sleep happen, tossing and turning, all that unpleasantness, how about we just do something that makes being awake more pleasant? You know, that makes, not only makes being awake a little bit more tolerable, but again, it comes back to training the brain that, oh, maybe being awake isn't a danger. You know, maybe it's not this physical threat that it might be, because you're actually kind of enjoying this wakefulness. So maybe I don't have to be quite so alert to protect you from being awake at night. And that in turn obviously creates better conditions for sleep to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that we've talked a lot about this kind of letting go and dealing with that anxiety. Again, I think people listening to this are going to be, yeah, that makes total sense. Maybe they've tried this, you know, I've tried allowing this worry, this anxiety to happen, but still struggling with it, still finding sleep difficult. I think it's helpful to emphasize that this is a whole new way of developing a relationship with our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. And so I think it takes time. It's not just going to be, all right, I'm really struggling tonight. Okay, I'm going to allow these thoughts, these feelings, and then suddenly we feel better, or suddenly we fall asleep. I'd just like to hear your experience a little bit more on that process. You know, was there a lot of practice? Was it really challenging? Like how long was it taking you to notice a change in the effect of difficult thoughts on how you felt and how you slept?
Yeah, on my end with my experience, it took a longer time, just because I had also goals of tapering off the pill. And so it started in September. I went to seek help around November. And then I didn't actually get medical help until December-ish. And it was just a slow process of like trying to accept each idea one at a time. So it would be like letting go would be a big one. But then that aside, I was always taking the pill too, just to like, I don't, so the sleep doctor that I was talking to was like, don't try to just do everything all at once, because that might be a huge, you know, like stress on you just to, you know, to sleep. And that's not what we want. So we did little like steps, baby steps at a time. And the longest one was just trying to taper off the sleeping pill, which was a really, it was a good technique, but it took long. Like it would be like, find one night in this whole week that you think, or you just try without the sleeping pill. So it'd be maybe more like a weekend where I can, you know, have like a really bad night of sleep or no sleep at all. And then I'll be okay because, you know, I've got my partner around to take care of the kids or whatever. And then if I'm confident for like one night a week, then I would move on to the next week, which would be like 2 nights in the week where I'm going to try no sleeping pill. But I mean, like, it's not every week I would jump or go to like 3 and 4 or 5 nights. It's like, if I'm only confident at 2, I would stick to 2 nights every week until I built that confidence, and then I'll go to 3 nights. So that kind of dragged along for a long time until, I don't know, it suddenly happened that I was like, there was one night I forgot even to take it when I was supposed to, because they, like, they make you track stuff on a worksheet, and I didn't really track it anymore. And then I forgot about it. And then I woke up the next morning. I was very happy that I was able to like, just even like forget. And now I've developed this thought or realization, maybe we should call that, is when I do take the pill, it will take the worries and whatever away, and the trying and the, the anxiety. But when I wake up in the morning, I feel just as crappy as maybe having no sleep. I was like, it's not worth it. I mean, it's kind of the same if I'm not going to sleep good tonight or take it. Like, I'm going to feel like the same the next day. So I just decided not to. Sometimes you even feel better, like if you have a poor night's of sleep without the pill, I realized.
I love how we've talked about, all these thought processes, and that it's difficult and that it takes time. And that we've talked about, that when you come from a place where you've been taking medication for a long time, that there's also another journey, is another challenge to kind of move away from that. And you touched upon the behavioral side of things in terms of getting out of bed to do something more appealing if being in bed doesn't feel good. Something that a lot of people with chronic insomnia can do in a bid to kind of chase sleep or make sleep happen is just spending a lot more time in bed than maybe they ever did in the past. So we might go to bed earlier because we just feel really fatigued, right? And we want more sleep to happen. So we might go to bed earlier or stay in bed later in the morning. And often that's one of these things that can actually perpetuate the sleep disruption, because we end up going to bed before we're sleepy enough for sleep. We can kind of stay in bed in the morning at all different times, which can be kind of disruptive to our body clock. And if we get out of bed late in the morning, we're going to be awake for less time during the day to build up that sleep drive to help us sleep the following night. So often it's suggested to a little bit less time for sleep, spend an amount of time in bed that's a bit closer to what your current circumstances are, the amount of sleep you're currently averaging. Was this something that was relevant to you in your experience, or was it a change that you made? I'm curious to hear your thoughts and experience with that.
Yeah, it was very relevant. I was told to, like, the same thing is to sleep kind of around the time you are sleepy. 'Cause everyone has like kind of their natural biological clock for sleeping and waking up. And we kind of had to figure out when my sleep time was and when my wake time was. And it was a bit of more of a strict plan at first, because it's, trying to train the brain, some new things and to adapt. So it was like, for me, sleep around 11 and then would wake up at around 6:30. And I say strict because like, I would do that kind of on the weekends as well for a little bit until, I don't know, until like I was just used to it. But, yeah, they also like, the sleep doctors also told me like, you still have to live your life. And you're going to have those weekends where, people are coming over, or you're going over to a friend's house, or, we have parties and weddings and all that stuff. So, like, those things need to be okay too in your life. Cause if you stick with this strict plan, then that's going to start to stress you out if you have other things in life that come in. Right. And that is exactly what I was thinking. And I had that question on my mind too. I'm like, well, if this is my life, then it would kind of suck, right? I'm going to be missing out on stuff. But yeah, at first it'll be a little bit strict, or at least it was for me. And then after, it's like once that confidence came in and, the routine was like, I can actually do this. And that just, like it really worked.
What you said there is really helpful, because it can be helpful or useful at first to be kind of have a more strict kind of routine. I'm not going to allow myself to go to bed, for example, before 11 o'clock. So I want to make sure that I'm really sufficiently sleepy enough for sleep to happen. And I want to try and make sure that I'm always out of bed around the same time every day in the morning, to help anchor my biological body clock and to make sure that I'm giving my body enough time awake during the day to help build that sleepiness for the next night. But at the same time, we don't want it to interfere with our life, because ultimately, what we do with our life, our actions, are way more influential over the kind of life we live than how we sleep. It's really what we do. So we don't want to be like, oh, I can't go out with friends tonight because I'm not going to be able to go to bed at a certain time. I'm not going to be able to do all this stuff that makes my life meaningful and rich, because it might interfere with the plan or with the schedule. So I think, it can be helpful, in the short term, maybe be a little bit stricter just to get those early results, to start feeling that really strong sense of sleepiness, which can actually be really reassuring when that returns, because we can just be so used to that feeling of fatigue, right? Just grogginess and feeling worn down, which isn't the same as sleepiness. So when that sense of sleepiness comes back, it can be really reassuring. And when we notice some early improvements, then we can kind of be a little bit less strict with ourselves, and just be like, I'll aim to make sure I'm not going to bed before a certain time. But if I feel really sleepy before then, I'll allow myself to go to bed then. If it's the weekend, maybe I'll allow myself to sleep in for half an hour or an hour, I think that's a good process to follow. And it sounds like that's what you found to be helpful for yourself.
Yeah, I've just been a lot more lenient, and like, especially weekends, feel like I can sleep in a bit more. Like it would be like the 1 hour, like sleep in more. And it's just that, again, it's that confidence, like I can sleep tonight. And if I don't, like, everyone has a bad night of sleep, even the sleepers or people that are good sleepers, right? Like everyone has bad, like that's just natural. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And you just have to learn to accept that. And if you do have a bad night of sleep, like you're not going to not function. Like you can still function. So that's reassuring.
Yeah, even when it feels like we just can't function, right? We can always, at even the most basic level, we can still breathe, we can still drink water, we can still eat. So it just comes down to it's that brain again, right? It's just trying so hard to look out for us. It's like, look, you got to make this has got to be fixed. We're not going to be able to do anything. But the truth of the matter is, the brain tells us one thing, but we can still do other things. Our brain could tell us, don't lift up your right hand, but we can still lift up our right hand. We still get to choose how we respond to all that stuff the brain is generating. But it takes practice. It's really hard to kind of separate ourselves from those thought processes, because they are just so intense, and they just feel so genuine. And it's so easy to just have that wave crash over us and just sweep us away. It really does take a lot of practice to change that relationship, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an easy fix, but it is fixable.
Are you telling me that you never have any difficult nights anymore?
No, I'm not saying that. For sure not. Even just last night, it was kind of difficult. I think at least there's still one night out of the week where it's not like very bad, but like it's still, I won't get the ideal amount of sleep that I wanted. So and it happens.
Yeah, I think it's so important to just recognize that we all have difficult nights from time to time, so it's kind of a loaded question, because I was secretly hoping that you were going to be honest and say that, I do still have difficult nights from time to time, because everyone does. I think what the change is, what the difference is your reaction to it, so instead of it being the default kind of reaction, which is all trying to battle with all those stressful thoughts and the anxiety that the brain is generating to try and help you out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of changing our behaviors during the day, maybe canceling plans as a result, and really kind of getting caught up, tangled up in the struggle. What's tonight going to bring? All that stuff. The transformation happens when you realize that, okay, I've had this difficult night, or I'm having this difficult night. There are things I can do in response, so during the night, I can do something a bit more appealing if it doesn't feel good to be in bed.
Mm-hmm.
During the day, I don't have to use all of my energy trying to push all these thoughts and emotions away. I can just let them sit and hang out for as long as they want,
Mm-hmm.
whilst I still engage in doing stuff that helps me just live the kind of life I want to live. I think when we get to that point, that's when we've truly put everything behind us,
Mm-hmm.
and our whole, I just don't think chronic insomnia can just no longer exist once we get to that point.
Yeah. And that's a good point too about like, the schedule and stuff the next day. Something that was very important to me was not to do that, like not to cancel anything. If you had like no sleep at all, say the night before, and you had like a whole calendar of stuff to do, like just don't cancel it. It's like it's still going to happen. I can still like, push through this. It makes a huge difference because if you start canceling stuff, um, then that creates that another like load of anxiety at nighttime is like, then your brain associates, oh, I have a big thing tomorrow, I must sleep, but then you're not gonna because you have a big thing tomorrow. So it's like that spiral again. So I've learned to like, okay, I'm just gonna deal with whatever I need to do the next day, and it's gonna be hard, but whatever. And so now it's like it's all good again.
That's one of those big changes that we can get to, is just recognizing that, this week, I would much rather be asleep, right? Nobody wants to be awake during the night. But
Mm-hmm.
just recognizing that that is out of our control. What do we still have control over? We still have control over our actions. So we can still do that stuff during the day. No doubt it's probably going to be more difficult. It's going to require more energy. But we can still do those things. When we're
Mm-hmm.
faced with a struggle, we really only have two choices that we can make. We can kind of give up, withdraw from life, kind of move away from the kind of life we want to live, or
Mm-hmm.
we can recognize what we don't have control over, focus on what we do have control over, and still like kind of commit. I think it does take a commitment, commit to doing those things that are important to us, that help us
Yeah.
move toward the kind of life we want to live. They might not feel as good. They might be more difficult because we're not feeling as good as we otherwise might. But the most important thing is just that we're doing them. And I think that really is just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like a little side note that I've from this whole like insomnia experience and being alone by myself at night really brought me to my spiritual side. So it's like now I'm more like, well, what is this like? Why is this like this problem on laid on me? Like, what am I learning from this? And instead of like, why is this happening to me? It's not fair being the victim. It's like, oh, what is this? What is the gift, like on the other side? And I truly think like a gift is just to share it and have someone listen to like my story and, be able to relate to it. So yeah, that was another big kind of like aha moment I had at nighttime.
I've had similar things like that before, where people just feel, once they've kind of made this transformation that we've been talking about, where
Mm-hmm.
they actually can reflect back and think, I don't necessarily think this had a 100% negative impact on my life. I think there might have actually been some good to it. This is probably sounding crazy to many people listening. How can any of
Mm-hmm.
this be good or have a
Mm-hmm.
positive side? But once we get to that point where we're able to reflect back, I think the experience can change us perhaps in a way that can be really kind of life enhancing for the future.
Yeah. Yeah, for me at least it was it definitely made me like stronger mentally and definitely made me see the gift that was hidden. I mean, it was hard. I was the victim. I had all of that and I was depressed and it was hard, but like at the end like I truly like received it as like, a gift.
All right. Well, Vicky, I'm really grateful for the time that you've spent with us today. I know that lots of people are going to find this discussion really helpful. But I do have one last question for you. It's the same question I ask everyone at the end of these discussions. And it's this. If someone with chronic insomnia is listening and they feel as though they've tried everything, they're beyond help, and they just can't do anything to improve their sleep, what would you tell them?
I would have to say that I've definitely been there. And I thought that there was no help for me and I felt lonely. But I would say and tell them that they're definitely not alone, because the theory that was taught by, you, Martin, the insomnia coach, is something that really works. Like the cognitive and the brain and all of that stuff that's the key. And there's plenty of help out there. And talk about your problems. Sometimes, like for me, I felt shameful at times, or like everyone has good sleep. Like I'm the only one out there, so I shouldn't really burden them with my problems. So the key is to seek help, I think. And I took from this experience as a lesson again, like I was destined to learn about something about me. And yeah, there is like a light at the end of this tunnel.
That's great. I think that's a positive note to end on. So thanks again for taking the time out of your day to come onto the podcast, Vicky.
Thanks, Dan. You're doing like wonderful work. You're sharing other people's story, which is like amazing. And I'm very grateful for you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Martin.